Welcome to the Podcast Lab, your go-to space for raw conversations, curious questions, and inspiring stories from around the world. Whether you're here to learn, laugh, or just listen in, this is where ideas take shape and voices come alive. Ready to dive into fresh perspectives and thought-provoking discussions? Let's get started. This is the Podcast Lab. Subscribe now and never miss an episode.
Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be tackling cases that really, I think, keep a lot of us up at night. Unsolved mysteries. And you know those cases that they defy explanation, they really do. And they leave you with more questions than answers. And we've got three really good ones lined up for you today. We're going to be talking about Amelia Earhart's disappearance, the vanishing of the Sodder children, and of course, the Zodiac killer.
Yeah, those cases all really capture the imagination. Earhart,
yeah,
this pioneering aviator, really pushing boundaries. The Sodders, a family tragedy with all these twists and turns that just seem almost unbelievable. And Zodiac, the cipher-loving killer who turned terror into a game.
Yeah, it's really quirky stuff. So let's start with Amelia Earhart, 1937. She's attempting to fly around the world.
Yeah.
And just vanishes over the Pacific. It's like the ocean just swallowed her whole. And what gets me is all the searches they've done, all the different theories out there. We're still no closer to really knowing what happened.
And that's the thing with these cold cases, especially when they involve disappearances in really remote locations. I mean, the lack of a crash site, any wreckage from Earhart's plane, it just makes it so difficult to really draw any conclusions. It's like solving a puzzle with half the pieces missing.
You're absolutely right. It's like, we've got these pieces, but maybe they're not the ones that we expect, right? Like, There's this theory that Earhart and her navigator ended up stranded on some remote island, and there was even that blurry photograph that came out, supposedly showing them alive.
Yeah, that picture. It's a great example of how cases like this can get really murky. I mean, the image is so grainy that even experts can't agree if it's really them or not. And even if it is, it still doesn't tell us how they got there or how long they survived, any of that. She just kind of throws another log onto the fire of speculation.
Right. Every new piece of evidence seems to just create more questions. And then there's the theory that Earhart simply ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean, which, on the surface sounds pretty straightforward. But again, no wreckage. I mean, is the Pacific Ocean just really good at hiding things? Or are we missing something obvious here?
I mean, the Pacific is vast. And you have to keep in mind that search technology back then, it wasn't what it is today. But there's another element to this we should consider, which is the possibility of intentional misdirection. Some researchers believe that Earhart may have actually been on a secret mission for the U.S. government, and her disappearance was staged.
Now, that's a twist. I haven't heard that one before. So we've got theories ranging from island castaway to a government conspiracy. No wonder this case is still just got people so fascinated with it. Okay, let's shift gears here a little bit to a mystery that hits a little closer to home. The Sodder children.
This case. Truly heartbreaking. And the mystery surrounding it is just as perplexing as Earhart's disappearance. Imagine this. It's Christmas Eve, 1945. The Sodder family home in West Virginia catches fire. The parents and 4 of their 9 children escape, but 5 of the kids, they're never seen again.
And here's what always gets me about that case. No remains were ever found. You would think that even in a massive fire like that, there would be something left behind. Makes you wonder if they were ever in the fire at all.
Exactly. And that's a really key point. The fire was investigated, and the official cause was faulty wiring. But some experts have questioned that conclusion. The intensity, the speed at which that fire spread, combined with the lack of any remains of those children, has led some to believe that it may have been intentionally set there.
Oh, wow. To cover up something worse, like a kidnapping. This is just getting more and more unsettling. Weren't there rumors about the Sodders having problems with some shady characters in town?
There were. The father had been very outspoken in his criticism of Mussolini, and some believe he may have angered supporters of the Italian dictator, potentially leading to a targeted attack.
Certainly. We've got potential mob connections, whispers of political vendettas. It's like something out of a movie. But then there's the photo, the one that supposedly shows the missing Sodder children, years later. Alive and well. It's almost too good to be true.
That photograph is definitely one of the most intriguing pieces of evidence in this case. It was sent to the Sodder family years after the fire, and supposedly depicts the 5 missing children as teenagers. And the resemblance it's uncanny, but attempts to verify its authenticity have been inconclusive.
Someone was playing a twisted game with this family, giving them this sliver of hope, but never enough for any real closure. Man, these cases are already messing with my head.
And we haven't even got to the Zodiac yet.
All right, let's dive into the mind of the Zodiac killer. He terrorized California in the late 60s and early 70s, but it wasn't just the murders, it was the way he did it. The ciphers, the letters to the press, the constant taunting. He was playing with the police and with the public.
What set the Zodiac apart from other serial killers was his desire to not just commit these crimes, but to insert himself into the narrative, to control how the story was told. The ciphers, the threats, they were all part of his grand design, turning this investigation into a public spectacle.
And the scariest part is, despite some of his ciphers being cracked, we still don't know for sure who he was. How does someone that brazen just vanish?
Here's where my experience as a former FBI agent comes in. I was actually involved in the Zodiac case early on. And what struck me was the lack of physical evidence. He was meticulous. No fingerprints, no DNA. It was like he was a ghost, always one step ahead.
It's like he was studying the investigators, learning from their every move. Do you think it's possible he had some kind of inside knowledge of law enforcement?
It's a theory that's been explored. Some believe he may have had a background in law enforcement or security. Someone familiar with investigative techniques and how to avoid detection.
Which makes his fascination with ciphers even creepier. It wasn't just about hiding his identity, it was about proving that he was smarter, more cunning than anyone trying to catch him.
He was playing a very dangerous game.
And unfortunately, he was winning. But he did make one crucial mistake, one that may ultimately lead to his undoing.
Oh, what's that?
He left a partial fingerprint on one of the letters that he sent to the San Francisco Chronicle.
A fingerprint? Seriously, yeah. After all that talk about ciphers and codes, it comes down to something so basic.
It might seem simple, but that partial print is huge. It's like a ticking time bomb.
How so?
Well, technology's come a long way since the 70s. Back then, that print might have been useless, but now with advancements in fingerprint analysis, it could be the key to unlocking his identity.
So they could potentially match that print to a suspect, even after all these years. It's a long shot, but it's not impossible. And there's another tool in the arsenal now that wasn't available back then. Genetic genealogy.
Wait, isn't that the thing they used to find long-lost relatives and stuff? How would that work with a cold case like the Zodiac?
It's revolutionized how we investigate cold cases. They can take DNA samples from the crime scene, in this case maybe from the letters or stamps Zodiac used, and compare it to DNA profiles in public genealogy databases.
So if they get a hit, even a distant relative, it could lead them back to the Zodiac's family tree.
That's the idea. Of course, the quality of the photograph might pose some challenges, but it's worth exploring.
It's wild. It's like science is finally catching up with this guy.
It's a game changer for sure. And it's not just limited to the Zodiac case. It's being used to crack cold cases all over the country, bringing closure to families who have been waiting decades for answers.
That's incredible. It's amazing to think that technology developed for something completely different could end up solving these mysteries that have haunted us for so long.
It really speaks to the power of innovation and the dedication of the people who refuse to let these cases go cold. But it's important to remember that even with all these advancements in forensic science, these cases are still incredibly challenging to solve.
Especially after so much time has passed, right? Witnesses might not be around anymore. Evidence could be lost or degraded. It's like trying to piece together a shattered mirror.
Exactly. And then you have to factor in the media frenzy that surrounds these cases. While public interest can be helpful in generating leads, it can also create a lot of noise and misinformation that investigators have to sift through.
Yeah, and we can't forget about the families of the victims. They're dealing with all of this while also grieving and searching for answers. It must be incredibly difficult to find peace when there's so much uncertainty.
Absolutely. These aren't just abstract puzzles to solve. They involve real people, real lives that have been tragically affected. And for those families, closure can be incredibly elusive.
It makes you wonder if some mysteries are just meant to remain unsolved. Like, is it better to have some kind of resolution, even if it's not the one you hoped for? Or is the constant search for answers its own kind of torment?
That's a tough question, and I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer. Each case is unique. Each family's journey is different.
You know, going back to Amelia Earhart for a second, there have been some interesting developments in her case, too. I read that bone fragments found on a remote island in the Pacific could potentially belong to her.
Ah, yes. Nikumero Island. That's been a hotbed of speculation for years. Those bone fragments were discovered decades ago, but they were initially dismissed as belonging to a man. However, recent analysis using modern techniques suggests they might actually be from a woman of European descent, possibly Earhart.
So after all this time, we might finally have concrete evidence of what happened to her.
It would be a remarkable discovery, not just for solving one of history's greatest mysteries, but also for showcasing how far forensic science has come. The ability to re-examine old evidence with new tools and perspectives really opens up a world of possibilities for cold cases.
It's like giving these cases a second life, a chance to finally be heard. Okay, so we've got potential DNA breakthroughs in the Earhart case, the possibility of genetic genealogy cracking the Zodiac mystery. What about the Sauter children? Any new leads there?
The Sauter case has always been particularly challenging due to the lack of physical evidence. However, there's been renewed interest in the case recently, and some investigators are hoping that advances in facial recognition technology could help shed light on that mysterious photograph that was sent to the family.
You mean the one that supposedly shows the children years later?
That's right.
So they could potentially run those faces through a database and see if they match anyone.
That's the idea. Of course, the quality of the photograph might pose some challenges, but it's worth exploring every avenue. And even if facial recognition doesn't provide any concrete answers, the renewed attention on the case might lead to new witnesses coming forward, or old evidence being re-examined. Sometimes all it takes is one small break to unravel the whole mystery.
It's like those moments in crime shows where they find a tiny fiber, or a speck of dirt that ends up being the missing piece of the puzzle.
Exactly, and it highlights the importance of preserving evidence, even if it seems insignificant at the time. You never know what might become relevant as technology advances.
Speaking of significant details, you mentioned earlier that the Zodiac made a crucial mistake by leaving that partial fingerprint, but he was so careful about everything else. Why do you think he slipped up like that?
Well, remember, even the most meticulous criminals can make mistakes, especially when they're driven by ego and a desire for control. It's possible he became overconfident, or maybe he wanted to leave a subtle clue, a way of taunting the investigators without revealing his true identity.
It's like he was playing a game, and he needed to make sure the other players had at least a fighting chance.
There's a certain arrogance to that, a belief that he was always one step ahead. But, as we've seen with other cold cases, even the most cunning criminals can be caught when new technologies and investigative methods are brought to bear.
It gives you a sense of hope, doesn't it? That even in the face of seemingly unsolvable mysteries, there's always a chance for justice to prevail.
It's a testament to the human spirit, our enduring desire to seek truth and accountability. And it's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's always light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, it really is amazing how, the longer a mystery like this goes unsolved, it seems like the more likely it is some new discovery or some new technology will come along and bring the truth to light.
It really is fascinating how often we see that in these cold cases. A piece of evidence that was maybe overlooked for decades suddenly becomes relevant thanks to new forensic techniques. Or a witness will come forward with information that maybe they were too afraid to share before. Sometimes it's just a matter of time and persistence.
And a little bit of luck, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely an element of chance involved. But I think you create your own luck too, by staying vigilant, by never giving up on the search for answers. And that's what I find so inspiring about the investigators and researchers who dedicate their lives to these cases. They're driven by this really deep sense of purpose, a belief that every victim deserves justice, no matter how long it takes.
It's like they're carrying the torch for those who can no longer fight for themselves.
Exactly. And that commitment to truth and accountability is what keeps hope alive for the families of these victims, even if a case is never officially solved. Just knowing that someone is still out there searching can be a source of comfort and strength.
It's really easy to get caught up in the kind of puzzle-solving aspect of these mysteries, the thrill of the chase. But we can't forget about the human cost. The families who have to live with this uncertainty, the unanswered questions, the pain of not knowing what happened to their loved ones.
Yeah, that's a crucial point.
Yeah.
These cases are more than just intriguing stories. They represent real lives that have been shattered, real families who have been left to pick up the pieces. And while the pursuit of justice is important, so too is the need for healing and closure.
And sometimes closure doesn't necessarily mean finding the perpetrator or having all the answers. It can just be accepting what we do know and finding a way to move forward.
That's true. It really is a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit. Even when faced with unimaginable loss and uncertainty, people find ways to cope, to heal, to rebuild their lives.
It makes you realize that there's just so much we can learn from cases like these, not just about the mysteries themselves, but about human nature,
right?
Resilience, and the enduring power of hope.
Absolutely. They remind us that. Even in the darkest of times, there's always light to be found.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. From Amelia Earhart's daring flight to the haunting ciphers of the Zodiac Killer we've explored, some of the most enduring and perplexing unsolved mysteries of our time.
And while we may never have all the answers, the journey of exploring these mysteries has been incredibly illuminating.
Yeah, it really has. It's reminded us of the importance of questioning, of seeking knowledge, and of never giving up on the pursuit of truth, no matter how elusive it may seem.
And sometimes, the most rewarding discoveries are the ones we make along the way.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. What unsolved mysteries captivate you? What questions keep you up at night?
Embrace that curiosity, that thirst for knowledge. Dive deep into the research, explore the theories, and form your own conclusions. Remember, the journey is just as important as the destination.
Well, thank you for joining us on this journey into the realm of unsolved mysteries. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep the flame of curiosity burning bright.